Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to talk about Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, and specifically today we're going to talk about Lord Bakaris' betrayal at the Warrior's Gate on the east side of Calamon. All right, so at this point, the first thing that happens is the player characters are back in Calamon. They've met the new Governor Thren, who replaced Governor Miat, who died, who was killed by Caradoc with all the other council members of Calamon, right? And the player characters are back with Marshal Ventry, and they're back with Lord Bakaris, who has a seat on the council at this point, right? And so basically what happens next is the Flying Citadel is on its way, and there is just at this point Calamon is aware that the Flying Citadel is coming. This is a massive, super dangerous weapon platform for the Red Dragon Army, and in addition, which is all under the service of Lord Soth. Okay, and in addition to that, the Red Dragon Army is actually marching underneath the Flying Citadel. Okay, and Bellefion, the Blue Dragon, literally gave his life to get this thing off the ground. Right. And at this point, the player characters are still in Calamon. They're trying to determine what they're going to do. They're also trying to be useful, like to Marshal Ventry and to Governor Thren, and maybe even to Lord Bakaris, right? Because the player characters, they know Bakaris is a little bit of a villain, and they know he's arrogant, and they know he's hasty, right? Like he's impatient, right? And they know his son Bakaris, the younger, is a jerk as well. But at this point, he's kind of just a jerk. He isn't known as a villain, right? So the player characters are in Calamon. Clystron. Okay, so who's Clystron? Clystron is this human scout, this guide who helped them when they were in the Northern Waste, right? So Clystron is this human this human scout who helped them, who was really a guide in the Northern Wastes. And when they were really solving the mystery of what the Red Dragon Army was actually trying to accomplish, and when they were looking for the City of Lost Names, which Dalamar helped them to find. Okay, so you have all this going on, and then finally, so Clystron and Knight Darrett, who serves Knight of Solamnia, Knight Benthic, right, and basically. Knight in Training Darrett, and Clystron, the Northern Waste guide, come back to Calamon on Dragonlance. And at this point, right, we've reached a point where the player characters, there's Dragonlance are all over, these kind of like miniature dragons that are fully capable of being ridden, right? And this is a big deal because in Dungeons & Dragons, for Dragonlance is really a promise of, hey, I'm going to ride a dragon, and I'm going to have a Dragonlance, and I'm going to stab other dragons while I'm riding this dragon, right? And here's what's interesting, right? Dragonlance, Shadow of the Dragon Queen, that's what I wanted. I wanted full-on, hey, this is how you become a Dragon Knight. This is how you subjugate a knight to now a dragon is your mount, right? Like, and you have this Dragonlance, and you go up and you fight, and you slay dragons in the air with Dragonlances, right? Like, and here's the thing, Hasbro ain't gonna allow that, right? It's just too much, right? And it is challenging because I think in Dungeons and Dragons we want to ride dragons. Like I think once you start playing, you're like, when do I get a dragon to ride? And the answer is never. Like, and the reality is, I think you'd have to put out an epic level book for that to even happen. But Hasbro knows, right? The designers on Dungeons and Dragons, the people who work under Kyle Brink, right? He's an executive producer, but the design team needs to actually deliver. And the Dragonelle is like, hey, we know you want to ride a dragon. We could put you into the sky, right? And we can give you a very strong. I don't think Dragonelles have a breath weapon though, right? And actually, just so you're aware, Jim Zub is doing a fantastic series of these. So the books for Dungeons and Dragons that describe Dungeons and Dragons for young adult, like junior high age students, it is actually a different. It's not acknowledged by Hasbro as a new edition, of Dungeons and Dragons, but it really is a distinct and new edition, right? And it talks about dragons in there as true dragons have breath weapons, right? So Dragonels, to my knowledge, they do not have breath weapons, right? But they are these dragons that will take you, that really will give any player character flight, and a lot of it, right? Like they can take another rider, they can carry, significant amounts, they can travel significant distances, and this is Hasbro saying, okay, we know you want a dragon mount. You can't get a dragon mount because it would be too imbalanced, right? If you have a dragon as your mount, like what the heck is even going to be able to threaten you, right? So the Dragonel is a way that F. Wesley Sneijder is actually arriving and saying, okay, here you go. Here is a mount that you could actually ride. That is very similar to a dragon, and we even call it a Dragonel, and it will give you dragon flight, but it won't overpower you to the point where nothing can really topple you in the game, right? Where it completely imbalances the game. So Clystron, the human Northern Waste guide, and Darrett return on these Dragonels, and at this point, the player characters have, if they want to get Dragonels, they can actually get them, or F. Wesley Sneijder has made sure to put Clystron and Darrett in a position where they can give rides to the player characters. And right now, there is a plan that is formed where it starts being discussed that the player characters will actually go to the Flying Citadel and infiltrate it through the tunnels that are on the bottom, right? And then fight Lord Soth directly on the Flying Citadel, because they're like, if this Flying Citadel reaches here and nothing stops it, and they're able to just rain down fury from Calamon from that Flying Citadel, just people are going to die left and right in Calamon. So the player characters have to do something, right? So at this point, this plan is being created to down the Flying Citadel, and the Dragonels that are not necessary to reach the Flying Citadel with the player characters are in position, right? And so you're kind of putting, pieces on the chessboard. Next, right, there is a report that the Red Dragon Army is arriving, right? Like there are actually Red Dragon Army soldiers in literally in the thousands, led by Draconians, right, are arriving, right? And so there's this report within Calamon to the player characters, because they're in Calamon, right? And they get this report that the Red Dragon Army is has arrived, and they're like, so the Red Dragon Army has arrived, and they need to determine what they're going to do, because it is reported that the Warrior Gate, a specific gate in the Calamon City, it's on the east side, is unguarded, right? And this report comes back and saying, hey, we checked that the soldiers that should be there aren't there, and so something's going on and something's wrong. Player characters run over there, and what they find is that Lord Bakaris has a contingent of Calamon soldiers that he has beguiled into aiding him, and he is opening Calamon City to the Red Dragon Army. So this gate has been opened, and Lord Bakaris is showing himself to be a traitor and a betrayer, right? Much like we just had in Dungeons and Dragons recently with the 2023 23th Manic Panic. We had some people who were like, I don't just dislike Dungeons and Dragons and want it to change, I want it to end forever. I want there to be no more Dungeons and Dragons. And that's pretty frightening. Like, having a betrayer in your midst is frightening. And I think it was specifically put into Dragonlance Shadow and Dragon Queen because I think writers and designers within Dungeons & Dragons knew there were wolves among the mists. That the OGLers, I don't think it was a surprise to many people that the OGLers were like, D&D be gone. We would rather Dungeons & Dragons be destroyed than changed, right? And so I think Lord Bakaris is a story in here that we are very clearly meant to see, right? A story of a betrayer, right? Somebody who lets the enemy into the gate, right? And that's the OGL and the OSR and the Orc. They're opening the door, right? And saying, we're going to let Pathfinder try to come in and destroy Dungeons & Dragons again with the same energy of the evangelical Christians. Pathfinder, fans saying D&D be gone, exactly the same way the 1980s American zealots or, American evangelical Christians were like, D&D be gone, right? And the reality is we now know, right? Pathfinder is a parasite that wants to kill the host and become the host, right? It's not just like, and everybody's like, oh, play whatever you want. No. Two people, right? Two groups, right? Professor Dungeon Master said there is a war for the soul of Dungeons & Dragons. He said that in January 2023. The Dungeon Dude said the war is over, right? When the OGL controversy spun down, when the whole balloon was popped with the SRD. Pretty incredible, right? Like, that's two people, not me, saying there is literally a war for the, for the fate of Dungeons & Dragons. And I think it's true. Like, it's not just play what you want. It's like, hey, you play to protect. We don't play Dungeons & Dragons because it's fun. We play to protect it forever so it won't be destroyed and gone, right? And so Lord Bakaris is opening the gates for the Red Dragon Army. Player characters defeat Lord Bakaris, right? And at that point, you see a note on him, and Bakaris the Younger, who was thought to be dead, thought to have been killed at Steel Spring, right, where Lord Bakaris led this impatient group to defeat the Red Dragon Army, and they failed, and the player characters had to go into literally the fray to save them and bring them back. Now we arrive at the whole of it, right? And what we see is we get to the point where Lord Bakaris, the younger son, is actually he was captured by the Red Dragon Army, and he agreed to help them so that him and his father could get positions of power when the Red Dragon Army defeated Kalamon. They had already defeated Vogler, right? So Bakaris the Younger's village had already been defeated, right? And so he saw that the Red Dragon Army had power, and he's like, let me hitch my star to these guys, and I'll be a king in the Red Dragon Army's victory, right? I'll be a lord in the Red Dragon Army's victory, and I'll be raised up even higher, right? And so he reached out to his dad and said, hey, help me betray Kalamon, and we'll let the Red Dragon Army in, right? And the player characters stop this, right? And this is Lord Bakaris' betrayal at the Warrior Gate on the east side of Kalamon, right? And so, incredible story. F. Wesley Snyder continues to just crush it. And I truly believe this is I think this is the third most important Dungeons & Dragons D&D hardback that's ever been printed. First was the first D&D PHB, D&D canon hardback, the D&D 1E PHB. Second was Strixhaven, a Curriculum of Chaos, because it opened the social interaction gate. Gary was the first to open up the combat gate, and then we still don't have an open exploration gate, right? And then this Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen is incredibly important because it is really, what it's showing is the absolute pinnacle template model of a hotel renovation, right? Because that's what we have all these old settings, and I've never seen a setting brought forward better. And Strahd brought back Ravenloft, right? But this does a better job, right? And it's the first time, too, where we see a modern designer just absolutely leap over the original creators, right? Hickman and Weitz look foolish compared to what F. Wesley Snyder is accomplishing right now with Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Every word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.